How we doing, guys? Welcome back to the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Richie, and I wanted to apologize to the audience. I don't know if it was just a very long day of celebrating, if it was me being exhausted from my Puerto Rico trip, but Idris and I both made a mistake yesterday. In addition to having a couple of sound issues, we made a mistake with the divisional round. We both know that they're a 5-game series, but for whatever reason, we put down results based on a 7-game series. So shout out to my guy, Michael Zappi, for pointing that out to me. So I just kind of wanted to redo a little bit of what we spoke about yesterday in a more organized way. It was kind of a bit of an improv situation, the way we decided to go about it. But these are my MLB predictions. I've got the New York Yankees and the Cleveland Guardians. Think it's going to be a heck of a series. I like the fact that the Yankees were able to get necessary rest, waiting on the winner from these wild card games. And I believe being able to set their rotation is going to be what ultimately gets them the dub here. I think the Guardians are going to give the Yankees all they can handle, though. Definitely a bit of a backstory with the situation that happened very early in the year with Miles Straw getting into it with some fans after Stephen Kwan knocked himself out during a game. Yeah, definitely have a little bit of a backup narrative that could make this very interesting, but I just think the Yankees have the deeper team. And even though the Yankees have had some question marks in closing out games, I still think they have a lot of viable options. And the Yankees, in my opinion, will go on to meet the team that has had their number and has been their big nemesis. The Houston Astros, this is a series based on familiarity. I really like the Astros to win this in 5 very hard-fought games. I got them going 3-2 over the Mariners, and I'm basing my decision here on just pure experience. The Astros have become so used to being in these kind of games. I think Dusty Baker is going to get them ready. I think they get the job done, but I think the Mariners are going to show that they're going to be around for a while as well. The most lopsided series I got going in this first round would have to be the Atlanta Braves defeating the Philadelphia Phillies. While you have to tip your cap to what the Phillies did, upsetting the St. Louis Cardinals, I think it was in some way an aberration. The kind of ball that the Braves are playing, the kind of confidence that the Braves are playing, and the fact that they are the defending world champions, I think will just be too overwhelming for the Phillies. But, the Phillies have to feel good about themselves. Since making the managerial change, moving on from Joe Girardi, this team has been very good. And I don't think too many people would assume or say that the Phillies would be in the playoffs this week and the Mets wouldn't. That would have to be the shock of the first round. I've got everybody's favorite in terms of who should win based on paper and talent alone, but not an easy one either. I've got the Los Angeles Dodgers beating their interstate rivals, the San Diego Padres, 3-2. I'll go as far as saying if Fernando Tatis was a member of this Padre team, were he not busted with the PED situation, I actually believe that maybe, just maybe, they would be able to win. But, the Padres showed a lot of resolve, winning 2 out of 3 in Citi Field. Not an easy place to win. And that kind of leads me into that result for the other side. The Mets had a phenomenal season, but it ended really abruptly. And, it begs to question, what is next for these New York Mets? What are they going to do next? A lot of decisions to be made. For one, you could look at a lot of reasons for their undoing. It's tough because they were in first place pretty much the entire year. I said it on the show yesterday, show that we're redoing today, that I believe that in the Mets case, it wasn't necessarily that sweep at the hands of the Atlanta Braves that did them in. I think what really got the Mets was series that were leading up towards the end of the year that, when you look at the schedule, were supposed to be easy, favorable, get-right series. Messing around and not taking care of business against the Athletics, the Nationals, the Marlins, and the Cubs ultimately came back to bite the Mets. And when you have the better part of a week off preparing and watching the wild card playoffs as opposed to suddenly being thrust into that situation, it changes things. If it's any consolation for Met fans, at least. Yeah, Diaz is the best closer in baseball. I think the Mets should feel good moving forward with that. And it's not like their championship window necessarily ends. Good point, Zappy. But I will say this. I believe the New York Mets have some serious decisions to make. Max Scherzer looked very pedestrian at the end of the year. And while, any great pitcher could get batted around in any playoff game, it's part of the game. His age at some point has to start being a consideration. Jacob deGrom, yet again, missed a huge chunk of the season. He pitched great in game 2, proved why he is one of the true greats in Major League Baseball pitching-wise. But they have a decision to make on how deep is their investment going to be in these two guys. Mainly right now what we're talking about with deGrom. Given his injury history, I'm just not sure. And it's going to be a very long offseason for the Mets, longer than most teams. And I think because of the fact that similar to last year they were in first more days than anyone else that didn't qualify for a playoff position. That was last year. This year, they're the only team to win 100 games that didn't advance to a divisional round. So the 2 years in a row, the Mets have a similar bad taste in their mouth. And I know for Uncle Stevie, a guy who's ultra competitive, that is going to be something that, quite frankly, is very upsetting. We're going to move it along to football. And this is exciting. The NFC East, the division that has the most Lombardi trophies, but that has not been anywhere near the top lately. Right now, they're sporting a record of 13-2 between their top 3 teams. The top 3 teams being the Philadelphia Eagles, who are the only undefeated team in the league still. The Dallas Cowboys, who have been doing it with a backup quarterback, but a phenomenal defense. And the New York Giants, who've been doing it without any true health in the receiving room, but have been leaning on the running game in a massive way, with Saquon Barkley leading the league in rushing, Daniel Jones contributing to the overall team rushing stat that has the Giants as the number 1 rushing unit in the NFL. Andrew Thomas, perennial Pro Bowler at this point, looks like he's playing at that level. Evan Neal coming off of 2 solid games after really having a rough go against the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys are winning it the old-fashioned way. They're running the ball. They are playing stellar defense. The Philadelphia Eagles yesterday get a quality win against a scrappy Cardinals team. Came down to a field goal at the end that could have sent it to OT. Yeah, Zappy, I have to say so. And I think it's becoming a staple of not just what's going on with the New York Giants, but also it's becoming a staple of what the NFC East is about. You yourself, when you guys lost on opening night, I think immediately you thought your season could have been over. The Cowboys have given you a pleasant surprise in showing that they can compete with pretty much anyone in the league, despite not having their main man, Dak. And that sets up a very interesting matchup this week between your Cowboys and the only undefeated team left, the Eagles. And I did make mention to this yesterday to Idris. In the event that Dak loses, that makes him 0-2. Rush would still be undefeated. And while I don't think it's fair to have a quarterback controversy, I think it's almost unavoidable that there's going to be some uncomfortable questions that need to be answered should the Cowboys not come up with the road dub. And that's not going to be an easy game. It's actually going to be quite a difficult one. But yeah, true grit by the New York Giants. Early in the season, I got to think that Brian Daboll is the front runner for head coach of the year. I mean, there's a lot of football left to be played, and that could be switched out in less than a month. But a signature win for the Giants, a win that myself, I'll admit, I didn't pick them yesterday. I expected that they would compete. But having their best point total of the season on offense on a neutral field against the team that I picked to go to the to go to the Super Bowl, the Green Bay Packers. The Eagles right now, in my opinion, really haven't shown any warts yet. Not enough to be beaten. But it does seem like the margin for error and the gaps are getting a little closer the last couple of weeks with the Eagles. I think it's going to be a phenomenal football game. I really do. Everybody in this division is eating with the exception of the Washington Commanders. Carson Wentz, just an ungodly, untimely interception towards the end of the game. On a bright note, it was really great to see Brian Robinson back on the field after the beginning of the season, something that could have turned tragic. he's lucky to be alive, let alone playing football. But it's great to see him out there living out his dream. But this division is back. I don't think this is any more smoke and mirrors. It looks like this division is truly back. And, I got to give a shout out to these guys, team that we like to have a lot of fun with because of our buddy Brett. But, got to give credit where it's due. They shut out the best offense in the league yesterday. The Lions have had an awful defense all year, but their offense has been putting up points. And in another meeting, Bill Belichick is able to shut down Jared Goff, similar to what he did in their Super Bowl meeting when he was still a member of the Rams. After almost defeating the Packers in Lambeau with Bailey Zappi, your namesake, and now defeating the Detroit Lions, and not just defeating them, shutting them out. Getting a shutout in the NFL is no small chore with the way that all the rules favor the offenses. Yeah, taking it back there for a second. Yeah, that walkout by Robinson was cool. It's good to see him out there, man. You don't want to see people's dreams getting stolen from them off of people that are coming at you just from sheer jealousy. What happened to that young man was very unfortunate, but hopefully he's a lot safer now. We don't want to see that happen to anyone. But the New England Patriots, just a huge win. And this is another division, excuse me, that's starting to cultivate some winning all the way around. The Patriots are in last place right now in that division, but it looks like they're trending upward. They had a big win yesterday against the Miami Dolphins, and I want to hit on those Dolphins. It looks like karma is hitting them hard. They unfortunately lost backup quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, who is a starter on many teams in this league. We already know what happened to Tua in concussion protocol. That has started a huge concussion protocol situation that some of the new protocols have actually been put into place as early as yesterday. But, I feel that they sacrificed that young man's immediate future and health to make sure that they can hang on long enough to get a win against the Buffalo Bills team. And since then, Miami has not been all right. They have not won a game. And I do think to some level, this is karma catching up with them. My best wishes go to Teddy Bridgewater, in addition to Tua, who has not returned since his very scary injury in Cincinnati. These are young guys that have their whole lives ahead of them. We don't want to see these guys getting these head injuries. It's scary. What happened to Tua was scary, but I think what was also messed up was that it was very avoidable and should have never, ever happened. And I think that's something that the NFL has no other choice but to address and take very serious. Because when you look at the effects of CTE post-career and you look at the many, many great players that have had a horrible finish because of these things, I'm not even going to name drop them. We know who some of these guys are. I'd much rather remember them as the legends that they were on the field. But the point is that a lot of these injuries and brain-related injuries have really, affected these people's lives post-career. And it needs to be acknowledged. It cannot be ignored any longer. Our opponents next week, the Baltimore Ravens, they finally finished. This is a team that, by all measures, could and should be undefeated, along with those Eagles. But they had two very heartbreaking losses late in games. One to the Miami Dolphins, where they just couldn't seem to make a stop at the end, where the Dolphins went berserk on offense. Kind of looked like a Madden game. And then last week, horrific coaching decision that allowed the Buffalo Bills to beat them with a walk-off field goal. I'm a firm believer that you never take points off the board, especially when you're going for a lead. There are exceptions to the rule. If they only needed a yard to get a touchdown, I could understand that. That was not the case. Harbaugh really cost his team a game there, but I think they responded well. I thought the Bengals were going to win this game. They did not. The Ravens hold serve at home. They needed to get their first home win. Both their losses have been at home. And I do believe that in addition to that Philly-Dallas game, this game out in East Rutherford between the Ravens and Giants is going to be a hell of a matchup. With two very mobile quarterbacks that can get it done. We don't have the best history against the Baltimore Ravens, but I do believe that this is a game that the Giants could win, and a game that down the road could be very important for the Giants to win. And, one thing I've noticed in the early going in this NFL season is that the parity is a real thing, man. The parity is a real thing. You know, so many games have been going down to the final minutes. I'm sure the NFL is loving that. It's keeping people engaged. Yesterday's game in England was a great way to start the day off. And if you look throughout the league, the Philly-Arizona game came down to something rather late. Last night's game with the Bengals and Ravens went down to the wire. Most games were really that competitive. I would say the one game that was really just done early had to be the Patriots with the most impressive defensive performance yesterday, holding the previously best offense in the league, which is hard for me to even believe, the Detroit Lions. And, you know, now Dan Campbell is going to be one of those guys that people are going to start questioning. You know, a lot of people like him. They were the subject of a lot of people's empathy, I guess you could say, on Hard Knocks. A lot of people were like adopting the Lions as a team that they want to see do well. And Dan Campbell's a good dude, but winning is the ultimate thing that matters, and they're not winning. Matt Rule out in Carolina, they got smoked yesterday by a very good 49er team that's starting to get their traction. You know, once again, you got to figure somebody's getting fired soon. My gut tells me it's Matt Rule. I don't know what the Lions are going to do with Dan Campbell. It just seems like one side of the ball is so bad, the other side of the ball is so good. But now when you go into New England against a backup quarterback, you get shut out. I don't know, man. It's starting to look like the same old Lions yet again. You know, gotta tip your hat to the New York Jets. They are kind of in the background of the New York Giants. That's always the way it is to a level. But, you know, they're one game worse than the New York Giants, and they had a quality win yesterday against a team that they've had a hard time beating lately, the Miami Dolphins. AFC East is very much a player right now. You know, the Jets are looking good. Since Zach Wilson's return, he looks like he's got a grasp of that offense. And Robert Saleh is having those guys believe. He essentially, down the road, depending on how the season plays out, could be another candidate for Coach of the Year. But I would have to say that right now, Brian Dable is leading that. We've got tonight, Monday night football game, the Chiefs and the Raiders. This is a game that the Raiders really need to win, but this is a game that the Raiders will not win. I think Patrick Mahomes is gradually reminding people just how good he really is. You know, he lost Tyreek Hill. On the other side of the football, Honey Badger went over to New Orleans. I think a lot of people were viewing this Chiefs team as their window to win Super Bowls and consistently be in the AFC title game was starting to dry out. And, you know, when you got a Raider team that is off to a horrible start, when you've got a Denver team that Russell Wilson, who is a future Hall of Famer, is just not being that player right now. While they do have a great defense, they cannot do anything on offense. And you have a Charger team that's nursing injuries that they were very fortunate to win yesterday in Cleveland. You know, a very poor coaching decision that could have cost them the game, did it. But the Chargers got themselves a tough road victory. It's not easy winning a road game in Cleveland. Doesn't matter what year it is. Cleveland is a tough place to play. They got great fans. Chargers got a big win there. But back, you know, circling to the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes is getting the most out of everyone. And I believe that the Raiders do not offer too much resistance to keep the Chiefs off the scoreboard. I think the Chiefs are going to score early and often. I do think the Raiders are going to hang, and I do think they're going to make this a game. But my final here is 38-30. I just got the Chiefs being a little too good on offense. I do want to throw this out, too, a thought from my game. The other team that lost that game, the Green Bay Packers, a team that I picked to win the NFC. And I want to ask the question, should the Packers be worried after losing to the Giants? I'm going to say yes and no. I think Aaron Rodgers said it best post-game that for years since he's been a part of that organization, even when watching from the sidelines, watching Brett Favre do it, there is a legitimate standard that is expected in terms of winning when you put on that uniform. Rodgers stayed the course. A lot of people thought that he was going to leave and go to a different team. That did not happen. I think Rodgers said the right things with his faith in the coaching staff, his faith in Matt LaFleur, who's one of the greatest coaches in Green Bay history, if we're basing it on how his season started. I think the Packers have a very talented team, but I think they're underachieving right now. I think they got a little lackadaisical, and I think the Giants took care of business. And I said it, I don't think the Packers played a bad game. I just think the Giants played a better one. And The Giants just looked like they wanted it more yesterday. Green Bay has a lot of young receivers that are very talented, but it's going to take time. I think one of the biggest reasons the Giants were able to win the football game yesterday is that they were able to keep the Packers' two-headed monster of A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones honest. I think that's why they won that football game. They are currently in second place. I don't necessarily think that's going to last too long. The Minnesota Vikings do have a game lead in addition to the one head-up matchup they will play again later in the year. But I just think the way Rodgers said it is kind of the most accurate way to view it. They just got to stay the course. The Packers have to stay the course. New Orleans getting a win over the Seahawks yesterday. I know a lot of people have been praising Geno Smith. And to a way, even I will, because he's having a career renaissance on a lot of levels. But I don't think the Seahawks are nearly as good as a lot of other teams or a lot of people think they are. If we're going to sound the alarm on anyone, there's a couple of teams that I'm going to look at here. Pittsburgh Steelers are pretty much buried. After an emotional Week 1 victory, their offense has been nothing but a mess. And it had to be the worst matchup they could have drew with the Buffalo Bills. There was a huge spread going into that game. And a lot of times when you get these huge spreads, it's hard to accomplish what Vegas thinks you're going to do. But the Bills just ran them right over. So if we're going to sound the alarm on anybody, it looks like for the first time in his career, Mike Tomlin's actually going to miss the playoffs. Buffalo Bills are who we thought they were. They are an elite team. Quite frankly, I think that it's their conference to lose. The Chiefs might have something to say about that. And that's going to be a phenomenal game coming up this week between the Chiefs and the Bills. One of the greatest playoff games in recent memory last year, and without a doubt, the best playoff game last season. That game was the motivation for changing the overtime rules in this year's playoffs, but it was a phenomenal, phenomenal game. I'm going to obviously preview that in a future show. But yeah, the Buffalo Bills looking every bit of who most people think they could and should be. And, until somebody beats them, you've got to give the Philadelphia Eagles credit. They are the class of the NFC East at the moment. And the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys keep winning and making sure that the Eagles are not running away. So for the first time in a long time, the NFC East is a very proud division and a very credible one. If you want to sound the alarm, I'm going to hit another one. The defending world champion Los Angeles Rams, I think, are starting to show people that what happened last year could very well be a one and done. This is a Rams team that lost 3 integral pieces that this season, their absence is truly being proven. Odell Beckham, who may be joining a team as early as November, maybe earlier. Maybe they sign him, help him through the final part of that rehab. He's a free agent. Huge contributor last year's Super Bowl. In my opinion, he may have won the MVP of the game were he not injured. Andrew Whitworth retired. You cannot replace a veteran like that in one off season. He meant a lot to that team, not only on the line protecting Stafford, but also just being a leader. And I would have to say the biggest loss of all 3 is Von Miller. Von Miller got a really excellent contract from the Buffalo Bills. And while Bobby Wagner is also a future Hall of Famer and a hell of a player, I don't think he has that same impact on the Rams defense that Von Miller did. But the biggest problem I see with the Rams, Allen Robinson is not fitting well into that offense. They are missing Odell, of course. They might bring him back once he's healthy. And, choosing Robinson, letting Woods go, I think might come back to bite them. I think Woods and Kupp had a great, great chemistry, and sometimes you can't mess with chemistry. Matthew Stafford, who I've been very critical of, got to give him credit for finally getting over the hump and winning the Super Bowl. But, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this man, even last year, was tied with Trevor Lawrence for the most interceptions in the NFL. And I do believe that the Rams are in a tough place. It's going to be hard for them to make the playoffs this year because the NFC is very tight. And offensively, I just think they're looking and searching for answers that they can't find. The Matthew Stafford interception yesterday that completely finished the game, unacceptable. That pass should have never been thrown. And I think Stafford, his internal clock in terms of how quick he gets a chance to get the ball off is kind of caving on him, and the O-line is not what it was. They can't run the ball with the same efficiency that they did either. Will an Odell return help spice up that offense and get things right? Maybe, maybe not. Allen Robinson hasn't worked out. Not saying that he can't work out, but he hasn't worked out yet. NFL season, really exciting right now. And we also have, the baseball playoffs in full bloom. Looking forward to seeing what my New York Yankees could do, chasing that ever elusive 28th World Championship. They're going to have to go through the team that has owned them, the Houston Astros. In the NL, it looks like potentially for the third straight season, Braves and Dodgers are going to fight for the right to go to the World Series. And they are the two most recent world champions. We hit on the Draymond Green thing last evening, short and sweet. If I'm the Warriors organization, there's only a couple of ways you can handle that situation, but I do believe that moving on from him might be the best way to go about it to kind of prove that kind of behavior is unacceptable. Given the talent that Draymond Green is, that's probably the reason why it won't happen. But I don't think you're necessarily sending the best message to your team by keeping him around. I actually like Draymond, but I think he messed up. And the only other way that I think you can get around it, you got to have both Poole and Green together in front of the media answering the tough questions and showing that this is something they can move on from. Brothers fight, friends fight. This is nothing new. But when it goes viral like that, it becomes a serious thing. It truly, truly becomes a serious thing. And, with the NBA on the horizon, we're going to be diving into the LeBron situation, closing in on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for all-time points leader, I should say. And it's exciting. Very exciting time to be a sports fan. NFL just having an excellent season. Nobody's running away with anything right now. I may be back later to speak on some of the more happenings leading into these MLB playoffs. Until next time, I'm Richie. Thank you so much for watching. And I've gotten up early 2 days in a row, like real early. I think the very early football game is kind of readjusting my body clock a little where I'm actually getting on a pod this early. But I wanted to clean up some of our mistakes from last evening's show. I take the blame on that. I just think the celebrating all day of a huge Giants victory, and I somehow had a brain slip and forgot that I don't know. I know the first round is 5 games, but I presented it as a 7-game series. So our apologies for that. I take the blame on that. But we'll be back soon, everybody, and thank you so much for watching.